Chapter 1. Fotheringay. My name is Bess Curl, but this is not my story. It is the story of my Lady Mary, Queen of Scots. She wrote the story, and then she gave it to me. I am going to give it to her son. She began the story a week ago. It was January 1587, and we sat here in our cold room in Fotheringay Castle in the north of England. We couldn't see much from the window. 1 or 2 houses, a river, some trees, some horses, and a road. That's all. The road goes to London, the home of Queen Elizabeth of England. Mary sat with her little dog in her hands and watched it all day long. No one came along the road. Nothing happened. I watched Mary, unhappily. "Please, Your Majesty, come away from that window," I said. "It doesn't help. No one is going to come. Queen Elizabeth can't do it. Queens don't kill queens." "Don't they, Bess?" Mary said. "Then why are we here, in this prison? Why am I not free?" "Why, Your Majesty? Because Queen Elizabeth is afraid of you." "That's right," Mary said. "She's afraid of me, and she hates me too. She hates me because I am beautiful, and she is not. Because I had 3 husbands, and she never married. And because many people, good Catholic people in England, France, Scotland, Spain, say that I, Mary, am the true Queen of England, not Elizabeth. And Elizabeth has no children, so when she is dead, my son James... She came away from the window and stood in front of me. "James," she said quietly, "my son. Does he think about me sometimes? He was only 10 months old when I last saw him. It is nearly 20 years. Of course he thinks about you, Your Majesty," I said. "You write to him often. How can he forget his mother?" "Then why doesn't he write to me?" Mary asked. "Does he want me to stay here in an English prison?" "No, of course not, Your Majesty. But he has a lot of work, Your Majesty. He is the King of Scotland, and he is not the King of Scotland, Bess," she said. "Not before I am dead. Remember that." "No, Your Majesty, of course not. But perhaps people tell him things that are untrue. You know what people say. Perhaps he thinks you killed his father." Mary's face went white. She was very angry, and for a minute I was afraid. She said, "You know that's a lie, Bess. It is a lie. I did not kill James's father. I knew nothing about it." I know that, Your Majesty, but perhaps James doesn't know it. He hears so many lies all the time. He needs to know the true story. Why don't you write and tell him? Mary sat down slowly. She looked old and tired. "All right, Bess," she said. "Give me a pen, please. I'm going to write to James and tell him the true story. You can give it to him when I'm dead." "Dead, Your Majesty? Don't say that. You aren't going to die." Her old, tired eyes looked at me. "Yes, I am, Bess. You know what is going to happen. One day soon, a man is going to bring a letter from Queen Elizabeth, and then her men are going to kill me. But before I die, I would like to write to my son, James. I want to tell him the story of my life. So give me a pen, please." I gave her a pen. This is what she wrote. Chapter 2. France. Dear James, very soon I am going to die and meet my God. Before I die, I want to write the true story of my life for you. Everything that I write here is true. I cannot lie to you or to God. Please believe that, James. It's important to me. My father died when I was 1 week old. So I was the Queen of Scots when I was a baby. At first, I lived with my mother in Scotland. And then, when I was 5, I went to France. My mother was French, but she stayed in Scotland and died there. I went to France to marry the King of France's son. His name was Francis, and he was 1 year younger than me. In 1559, his father died, so Francis was king. Then I was Queen of France and Queen of Scotland too. I was very happy in France. Francis, my husband, was like a little brother to me. I think he loved me, but he was very young, and he was often ill. And then, in 1560, he died. He was 16 years old. When he died, I was very unhappy, and my life was very different. There was a new king and queen, and I wasn't important in France anymore. But I was still Queen of Scots. So I came back to Scotland. When I arrived in Scotland, I was a young girl of 18. My mother was dead, and there was no one there to meet me. I walked off the ship, and I slept in a little house near the sea. Next day, the Scots lords came from Edinburgh. They were pleased to see me, and for a week everyone was happy. People smiled at me and sang in the streets. I think everyone liked me. Then, that Sunday, I went to church. James, my son, you are a Protestant, and I am a Catholic. You are a good man, and you love God, but your church and my church are enemies. I was born a Catholic, and I am going to die a Catholic. I love God too. I hope you understand that. I'm not going to change now. That Sunday, people shouted angrily in the streets. "Your Majesty," said the Scots lords, "Scotland is a Protestant country. You can't go to a Catholic church here. The Scottish people don't like Catholics." "I'm sorry, my lords," I said, "but I am your queen. No one tells me what to do. I don't hate Protestants, and I'm not going to kill them. The people can go to their Protestant churches and pray to God there. But I'm going to pray with Catholics in my church." People were angry because of that. A man called John Knox came to see me. He was a famous Protestant churchman, but I didn't like him. He was a big, angry man with black clothes. He hated the Catholic Church and wanted all Catholics to leave Scotland. To him, the Protestant Church was the only true Church of God. He said, "Your Majesty, you're a young woman like my daughter. Women can't understand difficult things like God or the Church. Find a good Protestant husband, girl. Let him rule this country for you." I was very angry with this man, Knox. I was a queen, but I was only 18. He didn't talk quietly. He shouted at me. I cried because of his angry words. I could not understand him. He talked so much, and he knew so many books. But I did not go to his church. He was right about one thing. Perhaps I could rule Scotland without a man, but I could not have a child without one. And every queen needs a son or daughter to come after her. So I began to look for a husband. Chapter 3. Darnley and Riccio. At first, I wanted to marry the son of the King of Spain, Don Carlos. But he was a Catholic, of course, and my Scots lords did not like that. It was difficult for me, James. I wanted to please myself. I wanted to please my friends and family in France, and to please my people too. And then there was the Queen of England. At first I wanted very much to be friends with Elizabeth. We wrote many letters and talked about a meeting between two sister queens. Elizabeth wrote to me at this time. "Our two countries need to be friends. You need a husband. I need a friend. Why not marry my friend Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester? He is a tall, strong man. I think he could be a good husband for you." I was very angry about this letter. There were a lot of stories about Elizabeth and Robert Dudley. They were good friends. He often danced and sang and talked with her. Sometimes, people said, he stayed in her room all night. Dudley had a wife, but one day she died very suddenly. It was an accident. She fell down the stairs, they say. But then, perhaps she was unhappy because of her husband and Elizabeth. And she writes to me about a man like this, I thought. She wants him to marry me because he is her friend, her lover, perhaps. She wants her lover to be King of Scotland. I found a better man than Dudley, James. I found Henry Darnley, your father. He was 19 years old, and I was 23. He was a tall man, with a beautiful face and big green eyes. He talked and sang well, and I liked dancing with him. He often wore expensive black clothes, and he laughed a lot when he was with me. He was very young and friendly, and I felt happy when I was with him. I liked him very much, and I thought he loved me too. He was an important man too. We were cousins. His grandfather was King of Scots, and his great-grandfather was Henry VII of England. In July 1565, I married him. Elizabeth was very angry, and so were a lot of the Scots lords. My half-brother, the Earl of Moray, tried to stop the marriage. I had to fight him, and he ran south to England. But I was happy. Your father and I laughed every day. He was now Henry, King of Scots. After 1 or 2 weeks, the laughter stopped. A king has a lot of work, James. You know that. He has to read hundreds of letters, talk to people, and think about a lot of important things. I did those things every day. But now, I thought, I had a man to help me. My Lord Henry, I said, would you like to read all the letters with me? You can sit next to me, and you can work with me every day. Your father looked unhappy. I'm not interested in work like that, he said. I don't understand it. Of course not, I said. You're a young man, my love. But I can teach you. For 1 or 2 days, he sat down with me, and I tried to teach him. But it was true. He was not interested in the work, and he did not try to understand it. You do it, Mary, he said. I'm going out with my friends. We're going to ride and drink and swim. So I did all the work. At night, too, he often went out with his friends in the town. They drank a lot, and laughed and sang, and there were often fights. But no one said anything, because he was the king, my husband. What could people say? They were unhappy, but they were afraid of him. Some of them went to England. At this time, I was often very tired, because I was pregnant. You, my son James, were alive inside me. But I did all the work of a queen, and I needed friends too. One of these friends was a young Italian, David Riccio. Riccio was a little man, and he was not tall or beautiful or strong. But he was a very clever, interesting man. He wrote many of my letters for me and helped me. He sang well, too, and I sometimes sang with him in the evenings. I liked him very much, and at first your father liked him too. But then More's friends began to talk about me and Riccio. "David Riccio is in the Queen's rooms every night," they said to your father. "She laughs and sings and dances with him. My lord, it is not right. He is not a Scotsman, and he is not her husband. He is always with her." Perhaps they said other things too. I don't know. A lot of Scots lords listened to them. But I tell you, James, before God, I did nothing wrong. David Riccio was a good man. He worked hard, and he helped me, so of course I liked him. Your father did not work. He went out to the town every night with his friends and drank. And then one night, your father came home. Chapter 4. The Death of David Riccio. It was a Saturday evening in March 1566. I was in Edinburgh with some friends. David Riccio was there, with 6 or 7 other people. We were in a small room, but there was a good dinner on the table, and we were happy. It was dark outside, but inside it was warm and friendly. Suddenly, a door opened behind me. In the door was Henry Darnley, my husband. I stood up and smiled. "Good evening, my lord," I said. "Please come in. Would you like something to eat?" "No, thank you," he said. "I'm not hungry. But I want to sit next to you, wife. Please tell that man to move." A man got out of the chair next to me, and Darnley sat beside me. Then he put his arms round me. I did not like it. His face was hot, and his eyes looked unhappy. But I smiled and said, "I'm happy to see you, my lord." "Are you, Mary?" he laughed. "Are you really?" "Yes, of course, my lord. But—" Then the second door opened. Lord Ruthven stood there. He had a knife in his hand. His face was red, and he looked very angry. At first, no one moved. Then Ruthven said, "Your Majesty, Send David Riccio out of this room now. I want him. I looked at Riccio. He was afraid. Why? I said. Why do you want him? He is a bad, wicked man, Ruthven said. Send him out. No, I said. You want to kill him. David Riccio is my friend. He stays here, with me. He goes out, woman, Lord Ruthven said. King Henry, hold your wife, please. I stood up, but Darnley held my arms, and I could not move. David Riccio ran behind me and held my dress. My friends in the room stood up too, and moved towards Ruthven angrily. But he had a knife in his hand. Get back, he said angrily. Don't touch me. Then 5 men with knives ran into the little room, and there was a fight. One man held a knife in my face, and another man hit David Riccio behind me. Then they pulled him out of the room. Help me, he screamed. Help me, my queen, please. They're going to kill me. Don't... I couldn't help him, because Darnley had me in his arms. But I could hear David Riccio's screams. I think he fell down the stairs, and he screamed for 2 or 3 minutes. Then it was quiet. What are you doing? I asked Darnley angrily. Riccio is a good man. Why are you doing this? Darnley laughed. You are my wife, Mary, not David Riccio's, he said. So why are you with him every evening? You never talk to me. I don't talk to you because you are never here, I said. You are always drinking with your friends. You aren't a king. You're a stupid boy. He laughed again. It was not a nice laugh. Well, he said, perhaps I am a boy. But that is better than David Riccio now. Do you want to go and see him? I did see him, 5 minutes after that. He was very dead, and there was blood all over the floor. Poor David Riccio. He sings to God now, not me. I looked at Henry Darnley, my husband. He had a stupid smile on his face. But I think he was afraid of me. I looked at him a long time, and the smile went away. Remember this night, husband, I said to him. Remember it well. Think about it when you look into my eyes and before you go to sleep. David Riccio was my friend, and you killed him in front of me. I'm never going to forget that, Henry Darnley. Never. Chapter 5. My son is born. Next morning, Darnley came to see me. He was afraid. What's the matter, husband? I said. Why are you crying? Oh, Mary, Mary, he said. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I helped those men to kill Riccio, and now the Earl of Moray is back here with them. He hates me. I'm afraid they're going to kill me, and you too. Think of our child, Mary, here inside you. He took me in his arms again. I was very angry. I am sorry, James, that this man was your father. He was a stupid boy, not a man. He was tall and strong and beautiful, but he could never think like a man or a king. I said, "You know these men, Henry. What do they want?" They want our child, Mary. They don't want us. They're going to put you in prison. They don't want you to be queen. They want your child to be king or queen. I don't know what they want to do with me. Perhaps they want you to be king too, without me, I said quietly. Then you can do what they say, like a little boy. Perhaps, Mary. They said that yesterday. But now that Moray's here, I don't know, I'm afraid. Please help me. He began to cry again. What can we do? We can run away, I said. We can leave Edinburgh quickly and quietly, before Ruthven and his men stop us. Be quiet for a minute. I want to think. I walked up and down for 2 or 3 minutes. Then I said, Henry, go back to these men. Tell them... No, Mary, please. I can't. I'm afraid of them. Listen to me, Henry, and try to be a man. Go and tell them I'm ill, because of the child. Say I'm not angry with them. Tell them anything. Lie to them. Then tonight, bring some men and horses here, behind the castle. He went and did it. All day I waited in my rooms and listened. Then, at 1 o'clock in the morning, Darnley and I went quietly down the stairs behind the castle. Some of my friends were there, with horses for us. Quickly, we rode away into the night. That was a very bad night. It was dark and cold. I was ill, and Darnley was afraid. Come on, he said. Ride faster, woman. You're too slow. But I was pregnant, and it was cold and dark. We rode for 5 hours in the rain. I can't, Henry, I said. I'm ill. Think of the baby. I don't want it to die. Why not? He said. We can always make another one. I'm sorry, but it is true. Your father said things like that, James. Then he rode away in front of me, into the dark. I rode slowly behind, with my good woman, Bess Curl. In the morning, we arrived at Dunbar Castle. Darnley slept, and I wrote letters to my friends. Next day, Lord Bothwell came to help me. I liked him. He was a good, strong man. Soon I had an army of 8,000 men. Bothwell and I rode back to Edinburgh with the army. Lord Ruthven died, and some of his friends ran away, but the Earl of Moray stayed. All that summer I ruled the country and waited for the baby. My husband stayed outside my rooms. I did not want to see him. No one did. Perhaps he drank with his friends. I don't know. And then, on the 19th of June, in a small room in Edinburgh Castle, my baby was born. It took a long time, but at last you were in my arms. James, my son. I asked your father to come in. My Lord Henry, I said, this is our baby. Look at him, my lord. Take him in your arms. He is your son. Isn't he beautiful? But your father did not love me, James. Very often, after you were born, he slept with other women. I know that because he talked to everyone about it. I think he wanted people to know. And I am sorry, but I do not think he loved you, James. When I took you to church and gave you your name, he did not come. He wasn't interested. But because of him, David Riccio was dead. I could never forget that. Never.